Welcome back to Fade In Deconstructed, and this is my final video in the deep dive for the screenplay to Joker. In my last episode, I argued that Joker's second act never stabilizes around a true dramatic engine. It opens several possible story threads: Sophie, Thomas Wayne, medication, the clown movement, Murray Franklin, but each one of these dissolves or gets replaced or functions more symbolically than causally. The final act depends on all of these threads converging. And this is where the movie becomes complicated, because as a standalone sequence, I think that the Murray climax works extremely well. But as the climax to the screenplay and to the film as a whole, it's underbuilt. And because those are different issues, I want to kind of keep them separate. So before Arthur gets to Murray, the movie has to move him from his apartment to the studio. Functionally, that's what has to happen. And this bridge includes the Randall murder, Gary's escape, the makeup transformation, the stair dance, the detective chase, and the subway riot. Moment to moment, this section of the film, the bridge between Act 2 and Act 3, has a lot of energy. But this stretch also exposes the film's dependence on staging and propulsion over clean structural architecture and causality. Let's start with Randall. I already talked about this in my first video, so I don't want to relitigate it here, but the point is that Randall's an example of Joker using supporting characters functionally rather than dramatically. He's friendly to Arthur when Arthur needs a gun. He becomes self-protective when the movie needs Arthur fired. And then he disappears completely until the final act, when they need someone from Arthur's old life to walk into the apartment and become his next victim, or I guess his first true victim as Joker before he gets to Murray. And look, that doesn't make the scene ineffective. The scene is tense because Randall underestimates Arthur. Gary is trapped in the room, and Arthur has already crossed into a new psychological state, a psychosis. But Randall's return doesn't redirect the story. Arthur's already preparing for Murray. He's already moving towards his final performance, and Randall's death only intensifies the transformation. It doesn't create it. He's going to kill Murray either way. Like, Randall being there and being his victim only is there to be a gut punch to the audience to kind of prepare them for what's ahead. The scene is pretty similar in both drafts. Randall comes by because the police are asking questions and he wants to make sure that their stories line up. Arthur kills him. Gary is spared. The later draft makes Arthur's condition more explicit by having him say that he stopped taking his medication and feels better now. That line ties the murder back to the medication thread, but only very loosely, because Arthur never pursued medication, treatment, or stability as a dramatic problem, so the line functions more as a thematic recall than structural payoff. The April draft is much stranger, is how I would put it. After killing Randall, Arthur takes his money, he takes the gun, and he writes a note saying that he'll be on Murray and to please watch. That all of that detail makes the Murray appearance feel slightly more intentional. Arthur's not just going to the show, he is conscious of being watched. The gun is necessary because in the April draft, he had hidden the gun. He had gotten rid of the gun in the bathroom after the subway murders. And so the plot needed him to have a weapon again, right? He still needed that gun. And so once again, Randall comes in to provide the gun. He's a tool. He's not a character, he's a tool. The December draft strips away some of the odd connective tissue and pushes the final act towards a cleaner kind of iconography. The makeup, the suit, the stairs, the dance, the chase, the studio. As visual storytelling alone, the stair dance is one of the strongest moments in the film. That's why it's the poster, right? Earlier, the stairs are represented as a burden. We've talked about this before. Arthur climbed them as a defeated man, and now he descends them as a performer. The same location has been transformed because Arthur has also been transformed, and that is powerful. That's why it works here. That's why it worked in Into the Spider-Verse. It makes you think of The Exorcist because of staircases, but in that movie, the staircase in Georgetown is shown to be kind of this like benign thing that has no significance really until the ending of the movie when Father Karras tumbles down to kill himself to rid Reagan of the demon. So this push-pull of imagery is not new to Joker, but they pull it off very well in the movie. It's powerful, but it's it's symbolic storytelling. It's not dramatic strategy. The movie's not showing us a plan unfolding through action. It's just showing us a body becoming an icon. It's showing Joker fully, transformed. Even though my argument would be that when he does his Buffalo Bill thing in the bathroom at the beginning, after in the act one turn after subway killings, he's already fully formed. So everything between then and now is just kind of spinning our wheels because he already knows who he is. He's Joker at that point, right? That's the whole reason for that. Focusing on the April draft again, the makeup sequence is definitely more private, and I'd argue slightly more grotesque. Benny and the Jets is playing while Arthur is applying his makeup and dancing and gyrating and thrusting his hips. And he's copying the clown mask in the mirror. The script literally says that he is a copy of himself, which is good writing. I like that. Even though it violates show don't tell, I like that because it really does paint a picture. And that version is definitely uglier and more perverse than the shooting script, the December script that they ended up going with. And then the detectives interrupt the dance. This is where the film's problem with consequence becomes especially visible. The detectives have appeared before, but they haven't functioned as a sustained pressure. They only show up when the plot needs them to give Arthur an obstacle. They don't force Arthur to adapt across the second act. They don't tighten around him scene by scene. They mostly exist as atmosphere until the final act needs motion. Now they're active. They chase Arthur down the stairs, through the street, into the subway. The sequence works as propulsion, but it also exposes the problem that we talked about in the last video, which is the Wayne thread. As I discussed in my last video, Arthur's already gone to Wayne Manor. He's already interacted with Bruce. He's put his fingers in his mouth. He's assaulted Alfred. Alfred knows who Arthur is. It's no secret. Thomas Wayne is extremely powerful. He's running for mayor, and Arthur is already connected in a way to the clown-related murder investigation. In a more causally rigorous version of the story, that incident should dramatically change Arthur's ability to move through the city. Right? People should be looking for him. The detectives should have had a stronger reason to close in earlier. But if the movie had honored those consequences, then Arthur loses the freedom of movement that the screenplay needs him to have. He can't just drift from Wayne Manor to the hospital, to Arkham, and then back to the hospital, and then back to his apartment, and then onto the stairs and over to Murray. So the Wayne thread is just dropped, not only because the father question's been answered, but because its logistical consequences would trap Arthur too early. The subway riot serves a similar function. Arthur escapes into a crowd of clown protesters, and visually, that's a really strong idea. I can see the image in the writer's mind. They're like, oh, this will be awesome, right? All these clowns, and then Arthur disappears in his clown makeup, putting a clown mask on, and now he's just part of the crowd. But again, to hammer this home, Arthur has nothing to do with the clown movement. He didn't organize it. He's not leading it. He's not directing it. He doesn't articulate it as his ideology. The movement grows around him, independent of him, and then becomes useful when the movie needs him to vanish into the crowd. And as myth, that works. As causality, not so much. But it does get us to Murray Franklin. And here's where I want to split the analysis in two. As a standalone sequence and as a climax to the movie. As a standalone sequence, the Murray scene is excellent. The live television setting gives the scene immediate pressure. It reminds me of Network. Murray is calm, polished, professional, condescending. Arthur is volatile, theatrical, and increasingly dangerous. The studio audience adds another layer because they are trained by the format of the show to laugh. They expect discomfort to be entertainment, and they think that they know what kind of scene that they're watching. So we have audience expectation upon audience expectation. It's a great setup. And at first, Arthur is a weird guest, eccentric. I mean, that's the joke, right? I mean, I don't know if this was a meta commentary on when Joaquin Phoenix was on David Letterman. If you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. It's pretty interesting how disassociated he was from the actual interview, and that's what the scene initially made me think of. His timing's wrong, his energy's wrong, his responses don't fit the format. Murray tries to, and I'm talking about Joker now, not David Letterman, even though it applies to both. But in Joker, Murray tries to control the segment, but Arthur keeps pulling it away from him. The audience laughter becomes uncertain because the social contract of the talk show itself is collapsing in real time. That is excellent scene escalation. The confession to the subway killings changes the room completely. Suddenly, this is not a comedy segment or an interview. It's a hostage situation before anyone on stage has fully processed that shift. So the murder works because the film delays it just long enough to create this true sense of dread. A quick comparison to that would be the basement sequence in Inglourious Basterds. You know something terrible is going to happen, but Tarantino stretches that scene out for what feels like 45 minutes because he just wants to build that dread, just build it and build it and build it and build it, right? And it's a pressure cooker until it just, there's nothing left in there and it has to explode. Climax of Joker has that same feeling. We know the scene is moving towards violence, but the exact form of that violence remains uncertain. Will Arthur kill himself? That's been hinted at numerous times in the film and in the script. In the April script, it's even more so, even more apparent that he's considering killing himself. Will he kill Murray? Will the show cut away? Will he freeze and not be able to do it? These are all the questions that, as an audience, having watched the movie, you're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And so that's what creates that tension. It's good stuff. And if this were a one-act play about a dangerous man unraveling on live television, it would work. It has a clear location, a volatile central figure, a host trying to control tone, an audience inside the scene, and a public setting that turns every line into a threat. So no, I don't think the climax is bad. I think the climax is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, sequences in the movie. But as the third act of a screenplay, it's got to do more than just create suspense. It has to pay off Arthur's relationship to performance, fame, humiliation, father figures, comedy, class resentment, social neglect, violence, and the public construction of Joker, because those are all the things that the writers have been throwing at us, right? They didn't have to. They could have simplified it. They could have condensed it. They could have, but they didn't. They gave us all of these things, and now we have to deal with them in the third act, or else it'll feel incomplete. And this is just simply too much for how little Murray has been developed. Murray should be Arthur's final ideological opponent. He should embody the worldview that Arthur is rejecting. He should be the final human expression of whatever the movie has been building against. Media cruelty, public humiliation, false empathy, comedy is domination, the powerful turning suffering into entertainment, the father figure who offers recognition only as ridicule. All of that is available, but the movie mostly just uses Murray as a fantasy object who becomes a plot device. For most of the film, Murray is just the man Arthur imagines will validate him. And when I say for most of the film, it's really just once, right? Just that one fantasy sequence in the beginning, and then we just assume that that's kind of like that carries through the whole film. But it's not something that we come back to. It's just that one fantasy segment. Arthur fantasizes about Murray embracing him and praising him and recognizing his pain. Later, Murray becomes the man who humiliates him publicly. And that contrast is emotionally clear, but it's not developed enough to turn Murray into a true final opponent. So again, we look at the two different drafts to see what changed. In the April draft, Murray is given a little bit more of a comic worldview in the dressing room. He sees Arthur's clown makeup and frames it as a timely, edgy, and dangerous kind of gag, suggesting that the danger itself can be part of the joke. That's not a complete ideology, but it does point towards Murray's worldview, because Murray sees social chaos and personal instability as potential material. Everything is fair game. The December shooting script makes Murray more bluntly cynical. Gene warns him that Arthur may be too risky, and Murray essentially says that the segment works, so they're going to go with it. This is cleaner and closer to the finished film, but it also flattens what little philosophy Murray had in the earlier version. So the rewrite, again, sharpens Murray as an exploiter, but it doesn't deepen him as an antagonist. To me, that's a huge wasted opportunity. If Murray had been established earlier as someone who routinely humiliates vulnerable people for laughs, or if Arthur's open mic night had been directly connected to Murray's show, or if Arthur had been actively shaping his comedy around Murray's approval, then The climax could become a true collision of worldviews. Arthur's need to be seen would collide with Murray's belief that people like Arthur exist only to be laughed at. But because the movie does not build Murray that way, he enters the climax with surprisingly little to say. He mostly reacts or scolds Arthur, expresses moral outrage. He becomes the voice of basic decency. I mean, you've got Robert De Niro here, and pretty much the only thing you have him say is, you know, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? How could you do those things? What's wrong with you? What's the matter with you? De Niro doing a De Niro impression. That's what it turns into. And that's not enough. That's not enough because basic decency has not been established as Murray's governing worldview at all. Arthur's monologue has the same problem. It sounds like thematic payoff because it touches everything the movie has been circling: society, neglect, humiliation, comedy, cruelty, class, recognition, what people deserve. But the speech doesn't resolve a dramatic argument because the movie never really committed to one. And it's simply not enough to say, I don't believe in anything, or I just want to be seen. Like, it acknowledging how messy the plot is doesn't excuse how messy the plot is. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. So once more, we must make comparisons to the two films that Joker is riffing off of, Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. I'm not going to rehash everything about Taxi Driver. I spent a lot of time in my last video talking about Travis Bickle. But I will focus on the ending of Taxi Driver, because Taxi Driver's climax is equally horrifying, if not more so. But it's also structurally inevitable. Travis's final violence is the endpoint of a chain that the movie has been building. Worldview, failed strategy, redirected blame, escalation, explosion. Joker reaches a superficially similar endpoint. Alienated man, decaying city, public violence, ambiguous mythmaking. But the path is much looser. Arthur's final act is not the result of a sustained strategy failing and transforming. It's the convergence of several symbolic elements: the gun, the makeup, the television camera, the crowd, the riot, the false father figure, the desire to be seen. It's that inevitability that separates Taxi Driver from Joker. Travis Bickle had to commit the acts of violence that he committed because his body wouldn't let him do anything else, and all of his other attempts at dealing with his own self-loathing failed. I don't get that at all in Joker. So let's move to King of Comedy, because that comparison is even more direct. Why? Because that film is also about a delusional man who wants to be seen on television. Rupert Pupkin, played by Robert De Niro. He wants access to Jerry Langford, played by Jerry Lewis. And he wants his access from the very beginning. The entire movie is structured around that pursuit. He tries polite access, then he tries social proximity, then he tries fantasy and persistence and intrusion, and then finally kidnapping. Every failure pushes Pupkin towards a more extreme strategy, which is why Rupert's television appearance works as a climax. It's not handed to him by coincidence the way that the Murray appearance is handed to Arthur by coincidence. He forces it into existence. He commits a crime to get the thing he's wanted from the very beginning. In Joker, Arthur hints at wanting recognition, but he's not really pursuing Murray as a concrete goal across the film. He watches Murray. He fantasizes about Murray. Murray means something to him emotionally. There's a connection between watching Murray and being with his mother. But the opportunity to appear on the show is delivered completely from the outside. Tape is recorded, reaches Murray, Murray airs it, and then the show invites Arthur on. In The King of Comedy, the protagonist drags the plot towards the television appearance. In Joker, the plot delivers the television appearance to the protagonist. And that difference changes how the climax feels. And I would also urge anybody interested in this kind of material to watch Network, because that also shows you how the same kind of setup, the same kind of climax can work extremely well when done right. After Murray's murder, Joker gives fully over to the myth. The Waynes are killed. Arthur's rescued from the police car. The crowd gathers around him. He rises and paints the blood smile onto his face. As an image, again, very strong. This is the birth of the Joker that we know, the Joker as public icon. But Arthur didn't lead the movement. He didn't organize the riot. He didn't direct the killing of the Waynes. He didn't intentionally create the political meaning that Gotham assigned to him. The world turned him into a myth because the movie needed the myth. And for many viewers, that's enough. The ending gives them the icon that they came to see. And I understand why it works. The Murray scene is tense, the riot is striking, the blood smile is memorable, and the performance is powerful. And so when you leave the theater, the things that stick with you are the dancing in the stairs, the violence on stage, the brutal killing of Randall, the Sophie reveal. I mean, the parts of the movie that work stick with you, and you kind of forgive it for all of its other issues. But the second you start deconstructing it, or thinking about it logically, or thinking about it from the standpoint of screenplay architecture, the whole thing kind of collapses and falls apart. And that's exactly why Joker remains a fascinating screenplay to study. Because the movie made a shit ton of money. Made a ton of money. It was nominated for a ton of awards. So maybe I'm wrong about all of this, but I don't think I am. I think that the movie took on a life of its own, and you can never predict that, right? You can never predict that. That's why there's no such thing as a formula that works, because if the formula always worked, it would always work. And if veering away from the formula always failed, then it would always fail, and then Joker would have failed. But just to sum up my feelings on Joker, this is a very messy script that could have been very satisfying. In my next deep dive breakdown, I'll explain what I mean by going through Will Tracy's screenplay for Bugonia, which I think is a fantastically tight and well-written script that adheres to the formula and elevates it, which is why it deserved to be nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. If you have anything to contribute to this conversation, if you think I'm wrong, if you want to add something, leave it in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know what other screenplays you'd like me to break down in this level of detail. And if you like this kind of content, come back to the channel for more breakdowns, videos on screenplay architecture, and lots of other fun stuff. So until next page, I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.